Chancellor, distinguished guests, it's a great pleasure to welcome you all to the 2019 Foundation Day celebrations. Foundation Day marks the inauguration of the university in 2004 and is the most prestigious day in our calendar. I also welcome you on behalf of our Chancellor, Lem Sisay, the Chair of our Board of Governors and Pro-Chancellor, Edward Assel, and Mrs. Gillian Eason, Pro-Chancellor, and of course members of our board. I'm delighted that our civic guests are present, and I also give a warm welcome to three of the founders of the university, Professors John Garside, Sir Martin Harris, and Dr. Roger Pannoni. Sadly, Professor Tom Hinchcliffe is unable to join us today. It was the founders' foresight in embarking on the creation of the University of Manchester that we honour here each year. I'm also very pleased that some of our alumni and donors are able to join us, and that we have representatives from our Global Leadership Board, our North American Foundation, and our Hong Kong Foundation. It's wonderful to see you here, and thank you for your ongoing support. Of course, I'm also delighted to welcome our Foundation lecturer, Sherry Kutu. Among other things, Sherry is an educator, a product strategist, a serial entrepreneur, and an angel investor who has done a great deal to help this university. I'll say a little bit more about her in a few moments before she speaks. We'll ask Sherry, the Foundation lecturer, to sign the university's Foundation Declaration after the formal proceedings. The text of this is in your programmes, and it summarises our guiding principles, so the annual signing reaffirms our commitment to our future ambitions. After Sherry's lecture on the future of work and a few questions, we'll show a short film highlighting issues about the university and the city which give it its Manchesterness. That's a new word, by the way, that's been coined recently. We then move on to the conferment of honorary doctorates by our Chancellor. Today, as well as Sherry, we will also honour Professor Dame Elizabeth Anyonwu, Mr. Vincent Company, and Lord Jim O'Neill. Congratulations in advance to all of you. Most unfortunately, Christopher Eccleston had to withdraw right at the last minute, but we will be looking to confer his degree at a later date. First, let me give you a very quick update on some aspects of the university and the external environment. And I want to tell you very briefly about our new vision and strategic plan. Many of the challenges that I described to you last year persist. Of course, we had the Augur review of post-18 education earlier this year, and it described how there could be a reduction in funding for students in England. We don't know whether that review will be taken up, and at the present time, indeed, whether there will be changes in fees. But of course, uncertainties over Brexit remain a cause for concern. I think I won't refer to those again. As indeed is international turbulence more generally. And of course, for universities, there are a number of issues around students and of course, around pensions. Our priority for the future remains to reaffirm our position as a global university that embraces staff and students and academic and business partnerships from across the world. This is a key moment for the university because in 2024, not that long off, we will be 200 years old. And we've been able to celebrate many successes over the past 2 centuries. Recently, we've made good progress towards goals we set out in our current strategic plan, but now it's time to look to the future as we enter our 3rd century. Early next year, we'll be launching our new vision and strategic plan, both of which have been developed after a very wide consultation with over 4,000 staff and students. Our vision is to be recognised globally for the excellence of our people, our research, learning and innovation, and for the benefits that we bring to society and the environment. The strategic plan retains our 3 core goals: research and discovery, teaching and learning, and social responsibility. But we also have cross-cutting themes: innovation, civic engagement, and global influence. And at the heart of everything we do is our people and our value. Parts of the plan build on our distinctive strengths. Parts are designed to help us make a step change in areas where we feel we should improve, and others will take the university in new directions. Over the past year, in research and innovation, we've attracted over £300 million of external research income. we've invested in a range of new activities, such as Creative Manchester, Healthcare Scientists of Tomorrow, the Air Quality Supersite, Nanomedicine, and the International Partnership Development Fund, used to develop partnerships with international world-leading universities. We now have 15 externally funded doctoral training programs supported by several funders worth £76 million that funds almost 20% of our research students. We've established some new interdisciplinary research institutes, such as the Lydia Becker Institute of Immunology and Inflammatory Diseases, the Work and Equalities Institute, and the Manchester Environmental Research Institute. We reached our highest position to date in all 3 league tables that we measure, and in the academic ranking of world universities, we were 33rd in the world. In the Reuters Innovation Rankings, we're in the top 100 globally and 8th in Europe. And there are many individual successes in research from both UK sources, internationally, and from the European Union, including the Future Manufacturing Research Hub, Social Sciences Research Commercialisation, the Arthritis Centre for Genetics and Genomics, and the UK Centre for Epidemiology. Particularly importantly, many of you will remember that our Patterson building, which housed much of our cancer research, was badly damaged by fire. Rather than simply mending it, it never was a very good building, we've agreed with the Christie to build a completely new one. And we were very pleased to be awarded £25 million for a National Competitive Research Fund. And we'll be developing that building with our partners, Christie Hospital and Cancer Research UK. So briefly, in teaching and learning, the University of Manchester is still the most popular for undergraduate study, with more applicants than any other universities. This year, applicants from international students were increased by 20% from across the world. I'm pleased that those students who failed to complete their degree, i.e. don't continue through their course, is now less than 4%. We have still very many students from disadvantaged backgrounds, putting us in the top 3 position in the Russell Group of universities on national league tables of social inclusion. Our Manchester Access programme and our Equity and Merit programmes supported thousands with the generous support of our donors. We established University of Manchester Worldwide to facilitate distance and blended learning centres around the world. We expanded University College for Interdisciplinary Learning, providing online interdisciplinary courses focusing on key questions facing society in the 21st century for our on-campus students. Our students continue to participate in wide educational experiences, known now as Stellify, and including our ethical grand challenges, which many of our first-year students take part in during the first week. Stellify offers students a unique and personalised set of activities designed to help them develop distinctive attributes of a University of Manchester graduate: socially responsible, highly employable, and resourceful global citizens. We're also excited to see the creation of the University of Manchester Institute of Teaching and Learning. And we were very pleased to be awarded the very top university by the Times and Sunday Times for graduate employment. Our student satisfaction in the national survey rose from 83 to 84%, just above the English average, and the same as the average for the Russell Group. And we're investing heavily in new student experience projects to support them through their university life. We know the significance of supporting the mental health and well-being of our students. And so last year, I foreshadowed a joint initiative working with our neighbouring universities and Greater Manchester Health and Social Care Partnership to provide the first dedicated centre to help support students in the mental health needs. This is now open. We were the first UK university to place social responsibility at the heart of our strategic goals, and it remains a key goal as we go forwards. This year, we were delighted to become the top-ranking higher education institute in Europe, judged by the THE, and the 3rd globally for our social and environmental impact across our full range of functions, as measured against the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We were the first university to achieve a gold watermark for public engagement, and we're one of only 12 universities in the UK to hold a watermark for racial equality. We've committed to Greater Manchester's 2038 net zero carbon target and endorsed Parliament's declaration of a climate emergency. And we've also set ourselves a target to eliminate all avoidable single-use plastics by 2022. Other successes in social responsibility include the works, with over 4,000 long-term unemployed people back into work. School Governors Programme, the largest in the UK, with over 1,000 staff and alumni participating as school governors. A record 1.3 million visitors to the Manchester Museum, the Whitworth Gallery, Jodrell Bank Discovery Centre and John Rylands. Our capital programme is progressing well. In December, the Duke of York officially opened the Masdar building, housing the Graphene Engineering Innovation Centre. In June, Lord David Alliance opened the brand new refurbished Alliance Manchester Business School. And of course, we also now have our Executive Education Suite, hotel on campus, refurbished Schuster Building, and Brunswick Park is open. We're getting closer to the Manchester campus engineering development completion, that enormous building on Upper Brook Street. This will bring all of our students onto a single campus. It will reduce our running costs and dramatically reduce our carbon footprint. But it will also release a major site on what was previously the UMIS site, North Campus. We are now searching for a joint venture partner to develop that into an innovation centre to bring prosperity to Manchester and new opportunities to our students and our staff. In July, we received the excellent news that Jodrell Bank Observatory had been awarded UNESCO World Heritage status. This is in recognition of its outstanding scientific heritage, and we think it's the only fully science facility ever to have been awarded this. And finally, while the university can't really claim any direct success, we were delighted that our Chancellor, Lem Sisse, won the prestigious Penn Pinter Prize. Lem formally receives the prize tomorrow at the British Library. So many congratulations, Lem, and also on the successful launch of his great memoir, My Name is Why. I can personally recommend it to you. So to conclude, there are many successes to celebrate, but we must continue to grasp opportunities and strive to make improvements where we need them while meeting many challenges. It's now my great pleasure to say a few words about our foundation lecturer, Sherry Kutu, before inviting Sherry to come and give the lecture. You'll be hearing more about Sherry's life when Professor Fiona Devine presents her honorary doctorate. Sadly, Luke Georgiou couldn't be with us today because of ill health. Sherry has extensive experience in the technology and education sectors and is executive chair and founder of Founders for Schools, an award-winning charity that connects educators with business leaders to improve the employment prospects of young people. She has an illustrious career in business, in education, and has been a great supporter of this university. So Sherry, can I invite you to please come up and deliver the foundation lecture? Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy, for that introduction. And thank you to the Chancellor and the Board of Governance and the Senate for inviting me to give a foundation lecture and for offering me an honorary doctorate, which is very meaningful, particularly as I love Manchester so much and have such admiration for the University of Manchester. I was really thrilled to be asked to talk about any subject that I wanted, which is actually quite intimidating as well. And it was hopefully it was going to be current and interesting to the audience. And I started thinking about, well, what is the most important thing? And I came to the future of work. And what I've really been doing for the last sort of 10 or 11 months is thinking really hard. And I love being given the opportunity to think harder than I've thought in the last 5 years on what is important, what is the future of work, what is our responsibility as a citizen, as a university, as a member of society. And I'm going to talk about that for the next little while. But thank you for that. I wanted to start up, I'm a Canadian, and I've got just a few things, quite a few slides to go through, but we'll zip through quickly. Life sort of became on this slide when I moved from Canada to the UK. And I went to the LSE, and I studied econometrics. I've always liked numbers. And after that, I became a computer programmer, which is a little bit strange because none of my degrees were in computing. And that started a lifelong sort of path of lifelong learning for me. After that, I studied business at HBS, and then I started in business. I started in startups, and the first one was sold, and then I started up the second one and floated it. And then life got quite messy, if you look at the next slide. And then I became a portfolio person. And for the last 20 years, I had a portfolio of interests, which would span quite a lot of things. At the center and at the core is entrepreneurship. But more laterally, it's how that connects to the transition of work and to what we are doing in universities and also what we're doing in primary and secondary school. Nancy mentioned there's a lot of things that I've had to do with, some of them to do with policy, about procurement. How do you procure from smaller businesses rather than just larger ones, the smaller ones where the innovation is, where they're creating the jobs. Some of the things in finance, I've invested in quite a few young companies that have really, some of them have grown very large and have learned a great deal from that. Probably learned more in my latter life, perhaps, than I did when I was in formal education. And that theme will come out as I go through some of the slides. Founders for Schools, Nancy has mentioned. I've done some things at the University of Cambridge on the publishing and on the assessment side because I was fascinated to know how you could tell if learning had been acquired. And how important that was, and I love the time that I spent in those organizations. And also with the London Stock Exchange, which has been quite fun because of the primary markets and the capital system and what that means to this society and how we organize ourselves. So that's sort of the last 20 years. If we look at the last 5, there's been a reorientation really around employment and entrepreneurship and the future of work. And I would argue that all of these organizations do work on the future of work and have allowed me to see some emerging themes, which as an entrepreneur excites me, as a citizen kind of possibly terrifies me, but really has called me to action. It is absolutely clear that the speed of our society is going very fast and is speeding up. You just sort of look at the first, some of the initial invitations before getting up to 50 million customers, and it used to be that our world moved quite slowly. But if you look now in the sort of social media area, you can see that Facebook took 3 years to get up to 50 million users, and Pokemon Go, just a matter of days. Now, these are restructuring our cities, and they're restructuring the way that our young people interact with each other, the way that we interact with each other, how we gather information, and how we do a lot of things. And that's interesting. You can think, well, that's great. The productivity is going to be soaring because these are helping companies do things. They're helping universities do things. And then you can think, it's great for consumers. It's so easy to just call an Uber, and it can be right there, and you can see it coming towards your screen. And that's all great. But not all things are great. And as you can see here, while we've got productivity gains, it also will displace possibly a lot of people. And that's what I've really been thinking about for the last little while as I've thought about what it meant for us and what all of us in this room should be doing or should be thinking about doing. 5 years ago, I was asked to write the scale-up report on UK economic growth, and part of that allowed me to see how fast our society was restructuring. I didn't know that 100% of the net new jobs in our society are created by companies less than 5 years old. I had no idea. I'm still amused when I read the papers at how they usually focus on the large companies that have been here for quite some time. And I love the large companies that have been here for quite some time, but I wasn't aware that much of the economy was going to the new ones. And that calls on us to act differently and to think differently. I didn't know before that, although I read about and indeed work for some of the FTSE 100, and we hear about them a lot, it's the case that the high growth companies that are created by alumni of institutions like this actually create 3 times as many jobs every week than all of the FTSE 100 combined. And that also is really interesting about how we should be thinking about the employability of our young people and the people that come through our organizations. I was very lucky when I was studying at Harvard. One of my professors and the supervisor of my thesis was Michael Porter, and he has written about the competitive advantage of nations. And I often think at a systemic level, what does this mean? And one of the insights is the competitive advantage of nations really goes to those that focus on creating an ecosystem for these young companies to flourish and to grow. But what does that mean for all of us? When my work at the Royal Society on data science has come up with some incredibly startling insights. This one is possibly the most startling. In the last 5 years, the demand for developers of this nature has gone up 8,000%. This is across all sectors, including the university sector, including financial services, including the creative industries. There's enormous demand for some skills. And what are we all doing to make sure that people can reskill themselves and skill themselves fast enough? I look at, coding is now known and accepted to be the second most important language after English. That makes sense. But before all of these other languages, is that really the case? And if it is, what are we all doing about that? What are we doing at primary schools? What are we doing at second? How does it affect our pipeline to the University of Manchester? And here you feel quite happy and you think, well, these are the positions that are going to be reskilled and not automated. So this is great. If we're in health, that's okay. If we're in technology, that's great. But there are some bits of society where young people, maybe whose parents are working in office support or food service, those jobs are absolutely going to disappear. And one of the roles for educational institutions are letting those who come from families who are working in these sectors that are likely to disappear to reposition themselves and to position themselves so that they will be in one of the growing sectors. And I think that is a role that we should all take very, very seriously. This just looks at the difference between 2016 and 2030 at some of where the bulk of the people are actually working in our society, and what they forecast. And this is McKinsey's forecast, but they forecast that to be in the next few years, and it's quite stark. This is unprecedented restructuring of our society. And again, as an entrepreneur, I get excited about that. As a citizen, I sort of think, ooh, we must all act together because these changes are so quickly. If we don't act in concert, government and universities and the school system, we will be in a really uncomfortable position. As a woman, I feel a little bit unhappy about the left-hand side of this slide because it shows that women in particular face being extra disrupted, possibly because of the decisions that they made when they were 11, 12, 13, where they chose not to study maths or physics, and that meant that they followed a career route. But this is going to be, the pain of this disruption isn't going to affect society equally, so we need to act so that we're happy with the outcomes rather than unhappy with the outcomes. Alarming to me as a mother of 3 is the fact that the onboarding and the transition to work that has been for young people before is now blocked. And what are we going to do about it? And I'll talk a little bit later, it's all very gloomy. There's hope, there's lots of things that we can do about it. But this has caused me to do quite a few different things as a result of realizing this. I'm kind of surprised that there are, at the moment, 990,000 open positions in our society. And I was yesterday with Tech UK, and their current forecast is that there will be 1.2 million jobs open and not capable of being closed in the next 3 years. And that 92% of those are in STEM. So what do we do to increase the number of STEM students? How can we do that? If there's going to be 1.2 million openings in the next 3 or 4 years, how quickly can you churn them out here? Because we need a lot more of them. But then that brings up some other issues, which I'll talk about shortly. So some of the response from the employers, again, those that are creating most of the jobs, are, okay, well, I can't accept this customer order because I can't hire people fast enough. What does that allow us to do? So this, if you think about, you work it through the system, it goes from academic to, oh my goodness, the companies can't fill orders because they can't hire people. What are we going to do about that? So the response of business has been, well, we will retrain or we will hire new people. But then you go to those that are retraining, you think, well, are we doing enough? This looks at the US and Europe on whether or not they plan to solve their skills shortages by hiring people, hopefully, that are there with the right skills, or in Europe, you can see that they're going to retrain them. Now, that's a great opportunity for a university. It's also a great opportunity for a number of other organizations, as we have seen. There are a number of experts that are claiming that again, quite scary things, that a job-related knowledge is more important than a degree. Now, I don't think that's the case, and I definitely don't think that's the case if you're getting a degree from this university. But we need to see that this is widespread, and that there's a need for systemic change. This is, again, sort of looking at the cycles of information. Whether or not people in the survey feel like the education system is working for the current generation. And they're not pretty numbers. They're not pretty numbers if you're an incumbent, but they are pretty numbers if you have an entrepreneurial spirit. And I know that this university has an entrepreneurial spirit, and it's also the spirit of the foundation lecture to be provocative. If we look at, what are the alternatives? Are they training in companies? Are they going to these Coursera's or Udacity's, some of the online courses? What are they? Are grades really important, or is experience of work and work experience really important? How fast? Can we really depend on the companies to retrain everybody and to train everybody? Do they understand the pedagogy of learning? Do they understand assessment? Do they have a deep understanding of the subjects that come within and from universities? Can we leave it to them to solve this issue that we have in front of us? There are complaints universally, this is across 70 different countries, of the way that universities are responding to this. I dare say, I'm sure that Manchester is not the one that people are complaining about, but it is a societal issue that we respond with new offerings and thinking hard about it. How can you help them with the human skills? We talk about, well, is it just the academic skills? And it's like, well, actually, part of the results of the social media is that the social skills that used to come through, I guess, sort of first primary school, secondary school, some of the part-time roles aren't being filled any longer. So there's a yearning, as you can see, for social and cultural and other problem-solving skills that we're not yet addressing well enough. Soft skills. How do we get soft skills? Do we get that through sitting in classes, or do we get that through projects? How do we get that? How is it imbibed, and what do we need to do at universities to make sure that this is occurring? I'm going to skip that one. Major impact. Are the subjects, because the world is changing so quickly, how important are the subjects that we choose to study? And there seems to be some debate about how important it is, and that debate, fluctuates across different countries. But I think it bears us thinking about, and again, you can see the UK, about how relevant that is. One of the things that I learned through my work with LinkedIn is that the number of jobs that a person will hold between graduation and retirement is 25, with 7 different identifiable career streams. So it almost doesn't matter what your first job is, because you're going to have 24 after it. Is that true? And what does that mean about how we think, and what we advise our children, and what we advise our grandchildren, and what we advise our students? And we know that families and educators are the most important influence on this. Work experience is seen by children, young people, to be the most important thing that will help them, but there's nowhere near as much work experience occurring. There are some universities that are making sure that every single one of their students has at least 4 placements during their undergraduate degree, and they fluctuate that to make sure that that is with the growing companies, the startups and the scale-ups, rather than the incumbents. And that's important for us to think, well, what are we doing, and do we feel comfortable with how we're placing these? The gig economy is everywhere. I came over here in an Uber, and I was asking the man, so do you like being an Uber driver? And he was talking about how it gave him the flexibility to do what he wanted, when he wanted, how he wanted. How we think about work is really, really interesting. How does somebody who's 40 or 50, when they find themselves displaced, retrain themselves? And where do they turn for that? Well, you can see, again, the classroom is being turned upside down. There's a lot of disruption. From the world of venture capital, I know that more than half of venture capital is now going into around the transition to work. Well, that's great. And there's all sorts of experiments that are going on, but sometimes those experiments aren't bearing the fruit that they should, possibly because they don't have the pedagogy, or there might not be enough interaction between the universities and school systems and these alternative methods that are coming in. And for me, I think for opportunities, that's a phenomenal opportunity. Reskilling and upskilling. Again, people are turning to the internet, of course, for reskilling themselves. Well, is that really the right place? And what kind of collaboration should be happening so that the reskilling that is taking place is going to work? Again, sort of tech and automation are an emerging theme and continue to be an emerging theme. And human skills now are more important than ever. And what are we doing as a society and as universities to make that happen? Again, STEM, important, human skills now seen as more important. People continuing to upskill throughout their lives. So again, a provocation possibly to the audience or to the university is, what are we doing for those in our society after their initial touch with us? So as an entrepreneur, I see these things swirling around, and of course it causes me to jump into action and say, well, what's happening here? And as you talked about Founders for Schools, and before we go on to the Q&A, what we were doing is pulling in people from businesses that are growing quickly and producing today's jobs and putting them in the schools so that the teachers can access these skill sets that are in their community for free while they're on their way into work or between gigs or whatever, so that young people can talk to the practitioners today and understand that. And I think at a societal level, that's a small, tiny way of addressing it, but communities and all of us should be doing quite a lot more for that. The second major initiative that I've worked with over the last 3 years, or found myself compelled as an entrepreneur to work with over the last few years, is WorkFinder, which is another technology similar to the LinkedIn, similar to the Zooplas, similar to many of the companies that I've created and invested in, but dedicated again to helping ease this. And if I think about sort of the new initiatives that we've got there is working with schools and also with universities to make sure that every single student has the opportunity to have, if they want it, to have work experience with these emerging companies so they can get the verbal skills. Work experience isn't academic, but it means that they have the problem-solving skills. The little projects that they do in, the week or the month is really solving problems for the company, and that's giving great skills, which are really not happening at the pace that they should. And the other company that I spend a lot of time with, or company and charity, is Raspberry Pi, which has been an utter joy to work with. And they've got a number of initiatives. Some of them are, Pi Academy, some of them are training teachers. And actually both Workfinder and also Founders for Schools has systems of training educators, short, stackable courses that are done over future learn and online methods so that teachers can retrain themselves. Now, that was inspired by Raspberry Pi, who put out a course for teachers and didn't know how many people would sign up to it. But 30,000 teachers signed up to within 24 hours of the course being released. And that showed the amount of discomfort that educators had, in this case, with their ability to teach in a confident manner computer science. Now, what I like is that tiny organizations can rise to this challenge and show us the way. But there are many other things that we should be doing. And that kind of brings us to the close and thinking, what more should we do? Is it the case that all universities should be offering lots of continuing education? And how do we, that's quite a large change for a large older university. But is it right that we would allow many people who aren't steeped in education and learning and whether or not people have learned, is it right to leave the floor to them? Now, as an entrepreneur, you think, of course, that's incumbents, that's fine. But I actually think the world is changing so quickly. Now is the time for action. So I'm going to open up for questions. But these are the things that have been on my mind because of the weird combination of experiences that I've found myself in for the last 20 years. I do think that they are highly relevant to all of us in the room, and I hope that some of you feel that it's a call to action. And I'm looking forward to your questions. And thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to think really hard about something, and also to do some things, but also realize that together as a society, we're the ones that are going to make this change, because we can't it's not anyone's responsibility. You can't say, the government must do this. Oh, well, Ofsted should do this. The teachers should do this. The universities should do this. We should all do this. We should embrace this change and make sure that we're happy with the outcomes. Because right now there's a lot of signals that show that the outcomes might be pretty uncomfortable. But we, just as with climate change, we don't have to accept that it's going to continue to go in that direction. So I hope you all join with me and change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherry, for a really excellent and thought-provoking lecture, which raised many questions for us as a university, and so it's timely if any of the audience want to ask. We have a few minutes for questions. I've got one right over there and then one there in the middle, whoever's nearest. Matt, I can see there. Is it Jackie in the middle? Yes, hi. Matt?
There's one just there. Yeah.
And then Jackie's here in the middle.
Your early slide suggests it was around about 1994 that you first got into startup type activity. I just wondered, over those 25 years, have the core skills, the soft skills, the core characteristics of successful entrepreneurs, have they changed immeasurably, or is there some commonality across those 25 years as to what constitutes a successful entrepreneur?
I don't think the core skills of an entrepreneur or a leader has changed. I think it's about spotting a change. It's about hiring the talent. It's about making sure that the team that you have around you focuses on the purpose, focuses clearly on the purpose, and is slightly, if not completely, obsessed with the customers. and what the customers need. I think that skill has changed. I think the environment in which we operate has removed barriers that stopped entrepreneurs from going, stopped our entrepreneurs before. So, Slack and some of the communication technologies. Remote workers are really make it a lot easier. AWS means it's really simple to throw something up. I think some of the lessons that we've had from the Ubers and the LinkedIns are simple things done repeatedly very often means that you can create exceptional services that super service customers. And the generalists, I think, really are going away because it's very, very hard to compete if you've got a generalist type company. But I think the skills haven't changed, but the environment in which entrepreneurs can flourish has changed, I think, for the better. If we look in the last 5 years, we've seen many of the barriers being removed. One of the key barriers that is still there and sadly is increasing is the skills gap. But we can do something about that.
Thank you. Jackie.
Hi, Sherry. My name is Jackie Carter, and I'm a professor here at the university. And education has defined my entire career. I started off in a secondary school, and now I'm a professor at a University of Manchester, which I love. But I wanted to pick you up on social mobility. So I run a big paid internship program here at the university. I'm enormously proud of that, but we actually pay our students to do an 8-week data-driven, research-led internship in between their second and third year,
Great.
Which opens doors hugely. But what always concerns me is whether or not we're actually dealing with those systemic issues in society about making sure that we're giving equality of access to this provision. So have you any thoughts about how we can sort of really tackle that head on, given that we are ready for change?
Yeah. Well, and I think they have, it's been shown that work experience and internships are often go to people not from the lowest, most deserving part. So I think we can be mindful about people's backgrounds. There are a number of charities working on this, and I think if they're not on your radar screen, then thinking about them as your pipeline. One of the things that we have done at WorkFinder is worked with a number of employability charities, so they use our platform, and we make it possible for employers to see, with the permission of the young person, that they come from a challenged background. And that if I'm an employer and I see I can choose from X, Y, or Z, then I know that I will choose that. So making things that are invisible so that we can super index on access is really important. And it's possible. I mean, we need to make sure that we respect people's privacy and don't do anything like that. But the outcomes are incredible. Internships and work experiences seem to be the #1 booster of attainment and aspiration. I think everyone should have it from the age of 16 as much as we can get it for them. In calculating whether or not that's a crazy thought or a possible reality, if you look at the number of potential hosts in the UK and you add the number of students together, in order for every student from the age of 16 to 24 to get 100 hours of work experience, you only need 3 hours per year of every potential host who's currently working in a private business today. So that doesn't seem like a pipe dream. You need to remove the friction so that it's really simple to use, but that's kind of what technology and platforms are for, and I think it would make an enormous difference.
So it's interesting because we've tried to focus our work experience particularly on disadvantaged students because they don't have the networks to create the opportunities themselves. So that's been quite a major focus. We've got a question at the back.
Hi, thank you very much for stimulating my intellect for the first time in ages. I read economics here, and a lot of textbooks give the impression that when a traditional industry closes, like coal mining or steelworks, people are made redundant on the Friday and walk into something else on the Monday. Whereas, in fact, there's often a generation of people who are on the scrap heap, basically. But the implication has always been that there's going to be something for them eventually. Now, it seems to me that what you were saying is that that may not be the case, that there may be a permanent group of people, following on really from what Jackie said, who are either won't upskill or can't upskill? And what do we as a civilized society do about that?
Well, I think you're right. If they can't reskill into one of the jobs that there will be, then I think that they will be excluded, and that will have a terrible toll. And in some areas of the country, it is already having a terrible toll. I think that's where the government and some of the social, enterprises and charities should come in and reskill and digitize. There's a lot of people in this country who don't have digital skills, and reaching out and making sure that they can be included. I worry a lot about women returners to work. You take a few years off or half a decade off to have children, and you feel pretty uncomfortable. And I think there's a role for internships and short projects that we all could make available in our companies if we're running them, to help reintegrate that talent that otherwise is excluded and feels really insecure. And a lot of this is about insecurity and confidence, and causes also a number of mental health problems. And I think that if we conduct ourselves as business people to do that, and work with the charities that have gone through these transition, working on getting the skills up of people who have been displaced, then we won't face some of the otherwise likely consequences.
I think we've got time for one more question, and I've got one right at the back. This is obviously the side for questions. Don't know what's wrong with you. So we'll take this last question.
This is a general question, really. And comparing working hours in the UK with working hours in certain other countries that you hear being much higher, just what is your view about the possibility ever of us in this country moving even towards this Elysian 4-day working week? Practical or impractical? What do you think? Will it ever dare I say, get off the ground?
I think so, particularly when you see the movement to remote working and flexible working and the gig economy. People with the talent are choosing when they want to work and how they want to work. I think some of the jobs that may be automated, maybe there won't be that choice. But I think if you are a person and you call the shots, and I think we're also moving to an area where companies no longer call the shots on how people will choose to work. So I definitely think that we will end up in that. People may choose to work 4 days, their productivity may be higher. In fact, there's some studies to show that it is higher when you do that. I look at some of the braided careers that you see with some of the data scientists and people in technology, where they're choosing 2 days in a university and 3 days in a company, and they can dictate that. So I think we will see a movement to part-time roles, and maybe a combination or a stack of part-time roles for people as they choose what they want to do. There's something like 80 job offers per data scientist that's coming out of our university system right now. They can call the shots. So if you've got the right skill set, you can go down to 4 days a week, 3 days, as many as you want.
Thank you. Would you join me again in thanking Sherry for an excellent lecture? And I hope you can now see why we're going to present Sherry with an honorary degree in just a few moments. And indeed, we are now moving on to the honorary degree part of the ceremony. Before that, we want to show you a very short film which has tried to sum up what the university is about. This will be followed by our student-run chamber choir, Ad Solum, singing Madrigal of Joy by Linda Spevacek. And I should point out, we were very proud when our Ad Solum choir sang with the BBC Proms Youth Choir in July. So we will be back with you very shortly. Thank you.
It's a great example of where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I think our university is a place where individual brilliance combines to create collective greatness.
I'm surrounded by experts at the University of Manchester, so I feel like I'm privileged to be amongst a learning environment that also changes the world.
The university is a critical site of social justice. We can't make a difference in the world until we understand people's experiences of poverty, until we understand the social, the political, and the economic drivers of it. Through our research and teaching, that's what we strive to do.
Innovation is about smart people working together. The University, Cancer Research UK, and the Christie NHS Trust all work together as part of the Manchester Cancer Research Centre. That's innovative science with innovative partners doing innovative things for not only science, but also our patients.
This place allows students to develop both personally and professionally and take everything they learn during their studies here at the university and apply that to the real world of work or postgraduate study.
Manchester is known globally for its research reputation, but I also wanted to come here to broaden my horizon by interacting with people from different nationalities and learning from each other.
Aid work is something I'm very passionate about, and my studies at the university have given me the opportunity to engage at a global level in disaster response after the typhoon in the Philippines, and also engage in the Ebola response in Sierra Leone.
So the ultimate aim of a university has to be to make the world a better place. It needs a lot of aspiration and high ambitions. This place has those.
The ultimate aim of the city is to ensure that all of our people can realise their full potential, and the university is an incredibly important partner in helping us do that, not only through the work that it does within its walls with its student population, but also in the work that it does beyond those walls in our schools and our communities.
My ultimate aim for the University of Manchester is to be a world-renowned institution for its discovery, for its education, but also importantly, for its benefit to wider society and the environment.
Manchester has been shaping the world since our very first students. We have a foot in the past and eyes firmly on the future. Our rich diversity of cultures, experiences, opinions really sets us as a global leader. Why wouldn't you want to be part of that?
One of the great things about this university is that the research that takes place here actually changes lives locally, nationally, and internationally.
Sing a song of joy, song of joy, song of song, sweet to be sung throughout the year, a song of joy. Oh, come join the merry song with sounds of love, with music lively and bright.
Distinguished guests, I would like to begin by echoing the President and Vice-Chancellor's welcome to you all this most prestigious of occasions, our Foundation Day celebrations, an integral part of which is, of course, this honorary degree ceremony. I would also like to say how much I enjoyed Sherry's foundation lecture and how proud I am of this university's history and current work, some of which was highlighted in the film that we've just seen. I'm also very excited to see what the future holds for this great institution. So, it's with great pleasure that I now perform one of my official duties as Chancellor, which is to honour 4 distinguished individuals with the conferment of honorary doctorates. Each of them has in their diverse fields contributed hugely to the good of society, and their achievements have had a positive impact way beyond their most immediate spheres of influence. As a recipient myself, I can appreciate their significance, being the highest honour that the university can confer. And in conferring the honour, the university is not just recognising these distinguished individuals, it is also making a statement about itself. A university is shaped and defined by the calibre, qualities, values, and achievements of those who choose and whom it chooses to join its community, whether as honorary graduates, alumni, students, researchers, teachers, or the many support staff who help to facilitate academic excellence in many ways. The university is therefore being enhanced by the honour that Elizabeth Anionwu, Sherry Kutu, Vincent Company, and Jim O'Neill are conferring on us. Put simply, we are honoured by honouring them. In just a moment, the Registrar and the Secretary will escort the first of our honorary graduates, Professor Dame Elizabeth Anionwu, onto the platform where Professor Dame Nikki Cullum will present her. Mrs. Sherry Kutu will then be escorted onto the platform and Professor Fiona Devine will present her. Mr. Vincent Company will then be escorted and Professor Chris Orme will present him. Finally, Lord Jim O'Neill will be presented by Professor Keith Brown. Before the ceremony ends, Lord O'Neill will address the congregation on behalf of all our graduates, and I won't drop my paper. So, it is with real pleasure that I now invite the Registrar and Secretary to escort the first of our honorary graduates, Elizabeth Anionwu, onto the platform for the conferment of her honorary degree of Doctor of Medical Science, honoris causa.
Chancellor, distinguished guests, Professor Dame Elizabeth Anionwu is a remarkable woman with a remarkable life story. She was born in Birmingham in 1947 to Mary Furlong, whose studies at the University of Cambridge were ended prematurely by her pregnancy. Elizabeth's father, Lawrence Anionwu, was a Nigerian student at Cambridge, although Elizabeth herself did not learn of his identity until she was 24 years old. Elizabeth spent a great deal of her young life in Roman Catholic children's homes because the circumstances of her birth made it very difficult for her to be brought up in her mother's family home in Stafford. Clearly an exceptionally bright child, Elizabeth had very bad asthma and eczema, and the care she received from a particularly kind nun in her children's home clearly influenced her thoughts of becoming a nurse. Elizabeth's education was fractured due to her family circumstances, making her many achievements all the more remarkable. She left school after O-levels to become a school nurse assistant and then began her nurse training in London in 1965. She later trained as a health visitor when she began to encounter children living with inherited hematological conditions such as sickle cell disease, which predominantly affects people of African, Caribbean and West African origin and has such a devastating effect on quality of life. While studying for a diploma in nursing at the University of Manchester in 1977, Elizabeth observed the lack of genetic counselling available to families affected by sickle cell disease, and the rest of her career was devoted to putting this right and to improving the quality of their care. She developed and led the first sickle cell and thalassemia counselling centre in Brent in 1979, and alongside her clinical role, she undertook groundbreaking research, documenting for the first time the experiences of people with sickle cell disease. Her work undoubtedly contributed to the inclusion of sickle cell and thalassemia screening in our NHS screening programme. After completing her PhD at the University of London, Elizabeth went on to become Senior Lecturer in Community Genetic Counselling at the Institute of Child Health in London. And then in 1997, Dean of the School of Adult Nursing at what's now the University of West London, where she continues as Emeritus Professor of Nursing. Another of Elizabeth's major achievements has been to bring Mary Seacole to the nation's attention. Mary Seacole was a Jamaican-Scottish nurse whose contribution to compassionate and skillful nursing care in Central America and the Crimea has been vastly under-recognised. Elizabeth established the Mary Seacole Centre for Nursing Practice at the University of West London in 1999, and she was also instrumental in the appeal to establish the Mary Seacole statue, which now stands in the gardens of St Thomas's Hospital. Elizabeth is patron of the Sickle Cell Society and the Nigerian Nurses Charitable Association, amongst many other roles. She was made a Dame in the Queen's New Year's Honours List of 2017 for services to nursing and to the Mary Seacole Statue Appeal. I am very pleased to present to you Dame Elizabeth Anyonyu for the degree of Doctor of Medical Science, honoris causa.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the university and with great personal pleasure, I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Medical Science, honoris causa.
Chancellor, distinguished guests, Sherry Kutu describes herself as a mother, serial entrepreneur, investor and advisor in her LinkedIn entry. As an early investor in the tech industry, this is a good place to start, but it is not the whole story. Born in Vancouver, Sherry was awarded degrees with distinction at the University of British Columbia in political science, at the LSE in economics, and later an MBA at Harvard Business School. After a period as an executive, she turned to entrepreneurship. She founded 2 businesses in the financial services sector, both of which thrived. She ran one of these, Interactive Investor International, for 6 years, before floating it on one of the most oversubscribed offers in the history of the London Stock Exchange, with a value of more than $1 billion. She then launched a further stellar career as an angel investor, specializing in the consumer internet, information services, and education. Sherry has made angel investments in more than 40 companies, including household names such as Love Film and Zoopla. She has received numerous accolades in the tech world and beyond, including being named most influential woman in UK IT, Barclays Entrepreneur of the Year Award, and an award of a CBE in 2013 for services to entrepreneurship. This in itself is an inspiring contribution, but Sherry deserves particular honour for her contribution to public life in the UK, where she has lived for more than 30 years. Sherry led an independent government review on UK economic growth. The result of her work was a hugely influential Scale-Up report. It identified the vital need to support not just startups, but the fast-growing companies, termed scale-ups, which contribute so much to growth and new jobs. The approach to the review was typical of Sherry, evidence-driven and focusing on the critical role of talent, both central, of course, to the ethos of the University of Manchester. Sherry founded the Scale-Up Institute, a non-for-profit company, to continue with the promotion of this sector for the benefit of the UK economy. Sherry also played a vital role in helping us here at the university to found our own Scale-Up Forum, which is a thriving club of 40 firms in and around Manchester who share the challenges of fast growth. She had previously been a supporter and inspirational keynote speaker of the Euroscience Forum ESOF held in Manchester in 2016. In recent years, Sherry has focused her efforts on a new activity, Funders for Schools, a philanthropic venture which goes back to the root of talent shortages. Its mission is to inspire students and prepare them for the rapidly changing world of work. It does so by enabling educators to invite business leaders for encounters with their students aged 8 upwards in just 4 minutes. You will not be surprised to hear that it has been based on an online platform which provides a free service, connecting educators with leaders of successful growing businesses in their communities. In her always calm, pleasant and measured way, Sherry has transformed the landscape for innovation in the UK and beyond, provided an inspiration to entrepreneurial young people, especially women, and turned her creative thinking and ability to bring ideas to reality and to realise key projects for the public good. Chancellor, it is with pleasure that I present to you Sherry Kutu for the degree of Doctor of Enterprise, honoris causa.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the university and with great personal pleasure, I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Enterprise, honoris causa.
Chancellor, distinguished guests, first let me say, perhaps unlike some people who recently visited Manchester, I do have an interest to declare. Social responsibility is one of the 3 core goals of this university. We aspire to inspire socially responsible graduates. Vincent Kompany, professional footballer and graduate from our global MBA program in 2017, is a most notable exemplar of this aspiration. He studied here whilst also being captain of, some would argue, the best team in the land and all the world. Vincent Kompany was born in Uccle, Brussels in 1986. His father, a political refugee from Zaire, arrived in Belgium in 1975, and, elected in 2018, he became the first black mayor in Belgium. His late mother was a trade union official. Vincent's career began at Anderlecht as a graduate of their youth system, winning 2 Belgian league titles before moving to Hamburg in 2006. In 2008, he joined Manchester City. It is said at the persuasion of his future wife, Carla, Mancunian and Man City fan through and through. And we are delighted that she is here with us this evening as well. Making his international debut for Belgium at the age of 17, he was made captain in 2010 and so far has been capped 89 times. Moving to central defence, he was handed his number 4 jersey at City in August 2010, and so it began. The FA Cup was won in May, and in 2011-12, he captained City in the most dramatic fashion to its first top-flight league title in 44 years. A further 3 league titles and 5 domestic cups followed, including the domestic treble last season, his final with the club. This represents an unprecedented record of KPIs, undergirded by the following more prosaic details. In the 2006-07 season, just 15 months before Vincent arrived here, Manchester City scored 10 home league goals all season, at a season card cost to me personally of £51 per goal. That's £70 in today's money. Last season, Manchester City scored an average of 3 league goals per home league game at a cost of under £14 per goal. As a centre-back, his key strengths are leadership, calmness, pace, and like the great Bobby Moore, an ability to read the game. More widely, they include loyalty, a sense of fair play, humility, and a social conscience. Social conscience, he wrote in 2018, is as much part of being a Manc as is the love of football or music. Concerned about rising homelessness in the city, he and Carla, in collaboration with Andy Burnham, created Tackle for Manchester to support the Mayor's Homeless Fund and in particular a Bed Every Night action plan. Culminating in his testimonial match last month, this year, Tackle for Manchester has raised in excess of £500,000, helping over 2,000 homeless people, with 700 moving into long-term accommodation. He is also a long-time FIFA ambassador for the SOS Children charity, and in 2013, he bought a Belgian third division football club, now BX Brussels, with the aim of offering disadvantaged youngsters the opportunity to use sport as a vehicle for self-improvement. Last month, he received the annual Tribute Award from the Football Writers Association. Vincent Kompany, forged in Brussels, matured in Manchester, has both on and off the football pitch demonstrated the very best of human qualities that should inspire us all. Finally, if I may, a personal memory from that title-winning 2011-12 campaign, the last that my son James and I would share before he left for university. April the 30th, Monday night, the derby. From a seemingly hopeless situation, we had reeled in our only rivals, our neighbours from Stretford, to within 3 points with 3 games to play. It's a cool evening, the setting sun slowly being suffocated by a crowd of dark clouds approaching the floodlit stadium. The usual pre-match ritual, Tony's Stadium Chippy, by a programme from Kenny, the spiral walkway climbing to block 328. We are both nervous and anxious, but we dare not speak it. 0-0 on the stroke of half-time. Then a corner. David Silva arcs in a delicious cross. The ball cruises in an easterly direction. In our penalty area, our captain is rising majestically and unencumbered. The crowd rises with him, holding their breath, save for Jeff, a few rows behind, who exhorts, "Please, God, now." Then, bang! Vincent Kompany, forehead, intercepts the ball, which now accelerates due south. The net billows. We all exhale. Joyous rapture ensues. The clouds crashing overhead disperse, and there is a blue moon rising over East Manchester. I am very pleased, nay, over the moon, to present Vincent Company for the degree of Doctor of this university, honoris causa.
Do you mind me asking him to give this to you? Yes. Is that okay? That was a beautiful speech. Come. I will speak the words, but I would like you to...
Thank you very much.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the university, vested in us by the university, and with great personal pleasure, I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of the University honoris causa.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
Chris, if you'd like to move from economics to creative writing, talk to me later. Chancellor, colleagues and friends, there's an old joke that astrology was invented so that economics would seem more like an accurate science, which you might argue is unfair on astrologers. That rather critical view of the dismal science has become sharper since the recent financial crash, given the apparent failure to anticipate what occurred. Nevertheless, a handful of economists have continued to be sought after, trusted, and respected. And chief among those individuals is Jim O'Neill. Well, he's the brick man, isn't he? Well, yes. Jim has cornered the market in snappy acronyms that encapsulate national economies grouped according to their projected development prospects. So in addition to BRIC, that's Brazil, Russia, India, and China, there is MIKT and MINT, which is all very well. But what lies behind the brand names is Jim's profound understanding of the global economy, especially long-term currency markets. When he published his BRIC findings back in 2001, what became in due course a shared expectation of how the world was shaping up was very far from obvious. But it was apparent to Jim O'Neill. And his insight catapulted him from being a highly respected and very senior figure in the banking sector to becoming one of the most influential economists in the world. That long-term view lies very much at the heart of Jim's thinking, alongside a rigorous analysis of data and a preparedness to be bold. He is not one of those economists of whom George Bernard Shaw wrote, "If all the economists in the world were laid end to end, they wouldn't reach a conclusion." Jim's approach to public debate is, by contrast, to the prevailing culture of short-term fixes, emotional responses, and vacuous sound bites. Adam Smith, the world's first great economist, observed that science is the great antidote to the poison of enthusiasm and superstition. And Jim operates according to that same philosophy. So, speaking as a self-confessed, dispassionate Remainer, he has been critical of what he described as the staggeringly emotional Brexit debate, a debate in which he has been prepared to shift his position when faced with new evidence. Now, had I opened this short laureation at what might be considered the beginning, if, and I speak as a historian, there is such a thing, the story would have commenced a short distance from here at Gatley, followed by an education at Burnage Comprehensive, before leaving Manchester and pursuing his studies and banking career elsewhere. Yet, in spite of his growing international profile and his interest in global emerging markets, Jim did not lose touch with those roots. And this is now a bit sensitive after the last one. Remaining a passionate Manchester United fan throughout the bad, the great, and I'm not sure what you call it now, the not so good years. The Northern Powerhouse, which of course emerged from the City's Growth Commission that Jim chaired, was, in his own words, my baby, my idea. And so passionate was he in his advocacy of this policy that in 2016 he resigned from his role as Commercial Secretary to the Treasury in protest at the May government's lack of commitment to it. Jim O'Neill is officially retired, but people with so much imagination and energy never really embrace retirement. Having chaired the review into AMR, he continues to be involved in antimicrobial resistance. He's an honorary professor in our own economics department. He is chair of Chatham House. And as Lord O'Neill of Gatley, he will no doubt continue to express his views boldly in the House of Lords. Chancellor, I am very pleased to present to you Jim O'Neill for the degree of Doctor of Social Science honoris causa.
By the virtue of the authority vested in me by the university, and with great pleasure, great personal pleasure, I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Social Science, honoris causa. Thank you. I can take that.
Chancellor, distinguished guests, wow. It is not only an honor, but it is a huge pleasure to say a couple of words on behalf of the four of us, Elizabeth, Sherry, and Vincent. Although I have to say, the more Chris went on about City, it was getting trying and challenging. But one of the things I was a little bit unsure about saying is now definitely going to happen. I was born in St. Mary's Hospital, which is less than a 5-minute walk away from here. And as you heard, being raised in Gatley for the first 18 years of my life, I am particularly proud of this honorary degree. And if my mum and dad were still alive, I know for sure that they would have been completely stunned, as well as, I think, proud. Throughout my professional travails and travels, when asked where I was from, I would frequently say, and I still do, that I'm from the center of the universe. And to be an honorary graduate of the university in the center of the universe is a true privilege, and I have to say, rather cool. And here's the bits that I wasn't sure about. Often, for many, many years, when those few that I said this to didn't know where the center of the universe was, had then figured it out, and of course to the numerous that did, the next thing that came out of their mouth was, oh yes, Manchester United. Sadly, this is not quite as frequent these days as it once was, but I shall leave that for another occasion. This is a particularly interesting time for Manchester in my view, in terms of, indeed, the Northern Powerhouse, something that I am also very proud to have been so heavily involved in. Our current, or he was about 3 hours ago, Prime Minister, gave his first speech in Manchester. And in the event that he survives Brexit, and perhaps if the country survives Brexit, I predict that the Northern Powerhouse will be at least as fully back on track as it was under David Cameron and George Osborne, and possibly more. And I am sure that this university will continue to help Manchester, as well as playing its own role, maintaining the central place that Manchester has. At the very heart of the concept of the Northern Powerhouse, Manchester sits in the geographic middle, where the agglomeration concept, as we economists think about these things, with Manchester 40 miles ish from Liverpool to the west and Leeds and Sheffield over to the other direction. Manchester is beautifully placed, and everything that this university has done and continues to try and do makes it a vital part in the cog for what I hope is coming. More broadly, as you heard from Sherry's comments and from some of the questions, our universities are increasingly crucial to the economic future of the country, especially in terms of R&D, but in my view, increasingly also to the commercialization of that R&D. This has frequently, as most of you know, been an Achilles heel of Britain since the Second World War. Lots of great research, which has often seemed to benefit a lot of the rest of the world more than the communities where many of them sit. Today, as I have observed before when I've spoken here, we have 18 of the world's top 100 rated universities, of course, of which Manchester is one of the strongest. There is a fantastic opportunity for each and all of them to become even more influential as well as continuing to help educate the smartest of the future for the world, to become more successful at helping create high value-added, useful jobs for those communities close and closer to home, and in this process, boosting productivity and the quality of life of those communities. I suspect that this government, and indeed whatever government and whoever may be the next one, is going to have to and may show eagerness to support these efforts, and I look forward to Manchester continuing with its fantastic leadership in this space. Thank you again.
Doctors Anionwu, Kutu, Company, and O'Neill, on behalf of the university, I would like to extend warmest congratulations on your honorary doctorates and to offer each of you our very best wishes for the future. I love this university. I now declare the ceremony closed.